Australia VTL opening up, it's very welcome news to keen travellers like us, as well as families who have been spread around the world. So we're here today to take you through the VTL process so they can get in, stay in, and come home safely. Of course, we encourage you to do your own research, especially with the changing regulations and government decisions, but hopefully this video will give you a good starting point for navigating all these requirements. Let's get into it. Grab a pen, grab a paper, and we'll take you through step by step.
So prior to departing from Australia to Singapore, there are quite a few steps that you will need to take before you can travel. And with COVID being quite rampant recently, the requirements are stricter than the usual holiday overseas. The documents which we're about to run through, it will be wisest if you have both a hard copy and also an electronic copy of these documents. So number one is the International Vaccination Certificate, which you can obtain from the Medicare app. The local certificate won't suffice. You actually need to obtain an international vaccination certificate from the app. You'll need to specifically apply for this on the Medicare website or the app on your phone and have it saved onto your phone as well. It's possible that your passport name and your Medicare name might not match. You'll need to go on the Australian Immunisation Register, give them a call so that they can then match up the Medicare name with the passport name. And the second thing that you'll need is the Vaccinated Travel Pass, which you can get from a Singapore website called Safe Travel. So this is one of the most important documents, in fact. It will be this document which, when you go to Singapore, if you need to verify that you are vaccinated, this is the document which you'll need to show. This will be needed through airports, through possibly hotels or even some tourism sites as well. The third thing that you'll need to keep in mind is that you will need COVID-related insurance coverage of at least $30,000. Now, the normal comprehensive insurance is useful in other ways, but in relation to COVID matters, it won't cover to the extent of $30,000. On the Changi Airport website lists three of the insurance companies, that being AIG Asia Pacific, Chubb Insurance, and also HL Assurance. We went with Chubb Insurance for our one, and they had a pretty decent price range, I thought, from $38 to $69 with a broad range of different coverages. Number four, and now this isn't necessary, but we do highly recommend that in addition to the essential COVID insurance that you'll be obtaining, it would also be helpful to have the non-COVID related travel insurance. So that being the usual comprehensive insurance that you obtain for your holidays. Let's just say if you're in Singapore and your stay will need to be longer than anticipated, the COVID insurance will cover any hospitalization or medical treatments, but not the potential extension of accommodation that you'll need. By having this comprehensive insurance, it will give you a peace of mind that some of those costs will be covered. For us, it was, I think it was $2,500 each. Yeah. Which when you break it down, that could be probably 12 to 15 days of accommodation included, and also in-room entertainment as well. The fifth document will be the arrival card and health declaration that needs to be submitted within 3 days from departure to Singapore. This document will be essential when you arrive both at the Australian airport and also the Singaporean airport. So make sure you fill this out within 3 days before you depart to Singapore. The sixth thing that you should remember before flying is that you'll need to take a PCR test within 2 days before taking a flight to Singapore. For international travel, it has to be a specific test taken at a private pathology clinic, which ranges between $79 and sometimes up to maybe even $120, $130. And the difference being that there's information on this paid PCR test that the usual ones don't provide. For our one, we went with Histopath, and it was actually considerably cheaper than the other ones. We paid $79 per person, and you simply had to pay for it online. There are two avenues for this. You can turn up to a community clinic and let them know that you need this test for international purposes. Alternatively, you can actually go to the airport as well, and there is a Histopath clinic there, which They say they can give you the result within, I think it's 90 minutes. So the seventh thing to remember is to book your Changi Airport arrival PCR test when you are still in Australia. It will really facilitate the process when you arrive at Singapore Airport. So you go on the Save Travel website to make this booking. It will cost 125 Singaporean dollars per person. Final thing to remember in terms of this pre-departure checklist is to download the Trace Together app on your phone. You can't actually activate the app and to use it until you actually pass immigration in Singapore. But because it'll be such a hustle and bustle by the time you actually arrive and there'll be so much paperwork there, it is best to download the app beforehand so that once you arrive, all you need to do is to activate it. So that was quite a lengthy checklist of documents that you'll need. And when we planned our Singaporean trip, it actually did take several days for us to really fully wrap our head around what was needed in order to just enter Singapore. So we hope that was helpful. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to put your comments below and we'll try to help out.
Hopefully you had an enjoyable flight and now you've landed at Changi Airport. Now we'll guide you through the process on how to get out of the airport efficiently and smoothly. Once you get off the plane, you'll go through immigration first, where they will check, of course, your passport, and they'll also check that you have your Trace Together app. Once you pass through that, you'll need to activate your Trace Together app. Once you've gone and collected your luggage, then you'll go join the line for your on-arrival PCR test. The first step of that is to register, and as Enoch mentioned, it helps at this point to A, be efficient in terms of getting your baggage and joining the queue, and secondly, to have your prepaid PCR confirmation ready. Once you've gone to one of the booths to register for the PCR test, then you'll join the queue to actually take the test.
They have signs everywhere that very clearly set out which stage you're up to.
Once you're done, you'll go through the arrival hall where you'll have a chance to exchange currency or pick up a local SIM card.
So of course exchange rates change over time, but in terms of conversion from Australian dollars to Singapore dollars, it's actually pretty straightforward because it's almost 1-to-1. I think when we did it, a 1 Singaporean dollar was around $1.02 Australian.
We do recommend picking up a SIM card at the airport if you find one that suits.
Keep in mind that, let's just say you've gone to your hotel and you haven't actually purchased a Singaporean SIM card yet. If you still have your Australian SIM card in, and that's the number that you entered on your declaration form and also the other documents that you've submitted, the Singaporean health will still send through your results via your Australian number.
The final step of getting out of Singapore Airport is to take private transport, so that's a taxi or Grab, which is the Singaporean equivalent of our Uber, or getting picked up in a private car by family or friends. So you'll go down to the taxi stand if you're choosing to take a taxi, and the taxi should take you straight to your accommodation, whether that's staying with friends or family or in a hotel.
Just to add to that, the taxi ride's actually really fun. The Singaporean taxi drivers, you'd think that they're part-time tourist guides as well. And they actually give many really good recommendations and advice for your travel. So we highly recommend that you pick the taxi.
Another reason that we recommend exchanging currency at the airport or having some Singaporean dollars on hand is because when we were there in December, they were transitioning the payment system for taxis. So a lot of taxis we found were not accepting MasterCard, Amex or Visa cards, and we actually had to pay in cash. Our taxi ride from the airport to our hotel in the city actually cost us only 25 Australian dollars, which is pretty unheard of in Sydney. Once you're checked in and settled into your accommodation, stay put for the night. We'll recommend ordering some food from Grab because you'll need to wait for your PCR test results to come through before you're allowed out. And of course it has to be negative. Our one actually came through really quickly. We got our results via text and then email within 5 hours, so we were even able to go out for a walk around the city after dinner. Congratulations, you're successfully in Singapore, officially.
During your stay, there will be quite a few rapid antigen tests that you will need to undergo. Days 2, 4, 5 and 6 You can self-administer it in your hotel room, and you simply need to upload a declaration saying that the result was negative. The Singaporean government actually sends you an email daily reminding you to undergo your test and also the exact link to complete this declaration. The negative rapid antigen test should be taken before you leave your accommodation. So in terms of the rapid antigen test, we actually purchased ours in Sydney, thinking that we have everything on hand and that would be much easier. But it would actually be better if you purchase your rapid antigen tests in Singapore. Firstly, there seems to be a severe shortage of rapid antigen tests in Sydney. And more importantly, the ones in Singapore are actually much cheaper than the ones in Sydney. When you buy them in Sydney, the average is probably about $11 or $12 per kit. In Singapore, they're only $4 to $5 per kit. So it might actually be better if you go to Singapore first, and after you get your negative PCR result in day one, go out to a 7-Eleven or whatever pharmacy really, and purchase your testing kits there. So for days 3 and 7, you'll need to undertake the rapid antigen test at a quick test center. So I'll call it a QTC moving forward. You self-administer a test and you're supervised by one of the staff workers at the facility. There's a website which you'll find in the link below from the Ministry of Health, where it provides you with a list of QTCs around Singapore. Now, this is probably the most hassling part, well, at least for us anyways, in what is a very efficient process. I think it must be half an hour to 1 hour trying to find which ones were closest to us. And they all have different opening hours and closing times as well. So it's best if you do your research actually in advance, maybe even before you go to Singapore, just so that you have an idea of which QTC to apply at. The tests at the QTCs cost $15 each. It's better if you prepay beforehand. You make sure that you're on time. Make sure that you have your vaccinated travel pass and also your passport ready. And keep in mind that there might actually be queues if you attend some of the QTCs which are more popular. So once you undertake the rapid antigen test at the QTC, unlike the PCR on day one, you don't need to isolate, and you also don't need to wait at the center for your result. You can just go on with your itinerary and you will get your result. It would likely be via text first, followed by email. For us, it was 15 to 30 minutes, but it depends on which QTC you go to. You might be wondering what would happen if you actually test positive for one of these rapid antigen tests. At least as of late December 2021, you needed to isolate and attend a PCR test by 4 p.m. the following day. And subsequent to that PCR test, you will then receive instructions from the Singaporean Ministry of Health as to what to do. So I know that's quite a lot of information there, and it does sound very tedious that on days 1 to 7 you'll have to do COVID tests on each day. Once you follow the right steps and know what to do, it will save a lot of time and it will be worth it at the end.
So you might have noticed that our table only goes up to day 7. That's because after day 7, there won't be any more rapid antigen tests or attending quick test centres for the sake of staying in Singapore until you're ready to go back to Australia, and that's when you'll have to do a pre-departure PCR test. But we'll talk more about that in the next segment. So we hope you enjoyed your holiday in Singapore. Now it's time to turn our attention to what to do so that you can depart Singapore and get home safely. The departure logistics aren't as complicated as the arrival ones, as I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. There are 2 things that you really need to keep in mind. One is your Australian travel declaration, which you'll need to fill out anytime you arrive in Australia. That one is to be done 3 days prior to your departure. The second thing to keep in mind is your pre-departure PCR test, and that is to be undertaken within 3 days of your departure time. To book this test, you'll need to, again, find a QTC, call them up beforehand, just to give them a heads up that you'll need a pre-departure PCR test rather than a supervised rapid antigen test, and book your appointment for going in to take that test. In our research, we caught up 3 clinics and we received quotes ranging from $107 to $150 per person. Once you've taken this PCR test, you actually don't need to isolate while waiting for your result. You can go about your day and the result will be emailed to you.
in Australia, it's best if you check the relevant website for your state because there are different procedures for each state. When we arrived back in Sydney in late December, we were required to take a PCR test within 24 hours on arrival and then another one on day 6. The good news is that no longer is needed. As of early January 2022, all you need to do is undertake a rapid antigen test on day 1, so on arrival, and also day 6. But make sure that you double check on that as well. So by now you probably know that there are quite an extensive number of steps that you will need to follow in terms of COVID requirements. But that being said, if you have everything organised and if you have everything pre-arranged, it actually makes life a lot easier when you're in Singapore.
I will explain more about this in a later video, but other than some local COVID restrictions such as mask wearing or capacity limits, we were pretty much able to explore Singapore as it were, in terms of the tourist attractions, in terms of food stores. I mean, even the old Airport Road Hawker Centre was open, just that you had to wear masks when you weren't eating or drinking. So we've mentioned different costs throughout the video, and we're going to put them up on the screen for you now in a table, just so you can see and pre-plan the costs of the trip. And these are costs that directly relate to the COVID requirements that are needed on top of your normal travel expenses such as accommodation, food and spending money. However, I do have to point out that in comparison to Australia, accommodation, food and transportation were relatively cheaper, even with the tiny difference in exchange rate.
In particular, the taxi rides.
Yeah, the taxi rides are so good.
The taxi rides are, I would say, a third to half the price of Australian prices. And food-wise, it was generally cheaper. And in particular, the hawker stores prices are much lower and much more worth it as well. So we hope you found that summary of the COVID requirements in Singapore helpful. Now, I know there are quite a few there, but once you have everything under control, I can assure you that it'll be very worth it. In the description below, we've also added several links which we believe will be very helpful.
So before you go anywhere, give this video a like if you found it helpful. Comment below any questions that you have and we'll try our best to answer them. And subscribe for more helpful videos on Singapore to make your trip smooth and memorable.
So this video on VTL requirements is the first video in a series that we're putting together in relation to our Singaporean trip. There will be several that we'll upload in the upcoming weeks and months in relation to other aspects of our trip, such as accommodation, tourism sites. So we look forward to uploading those soon, and hopefully you'll be around to enjoy those as well.
Bye!